Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the AF Wednesday webinar. I'm John Waitson, and I head up the renewables project offering here at AF. This month, we're shining a spotlight on renewable energy. We've got a panel of excellent speakers available to present and discuss different renewable opportunities on farm and what these opportunities may present to you, our members. Before we begin, I've got a little bit of housekeeping. We will be recording the session and it will be available online afterwards for anybody to watch again. Everyone except our speakers will be on mute for the full duration of the presentation. If you have a question, please add it to the chat box. We will take a few questions after each of the speakers, and if we can't get them all in, we will try and answer a few questions afterwards. Each speaker is going to get 15 minutes and will then get 5 minutes of questions. Unfortunately, we're down to 3 speakers this afternoon, as Malcolm Farrow from Offtech will be unavailable to join us and has sent his apologies. If anybody specifically has questions for Malcolm, please send these through and we'll make sure that we get some responses back from him. So now that's done, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is James Rundell, who is Head of International Sales at Cube Renewables. Cube Renewables specializes anaerobic digestion technology and has designed their first digester in response to a request from the UK's MOD to deal with food and sewage waste overseas to provide energy. Many of us attending will be familiar with traditional scale AD plants, which are commonplace in rural areas. However, Cube are innovative in bringing this offering at a completely different scale. Over to James.
Hi, John. Hello, everybody. Hi, Sophie. My name's James Rundell and I'm Head of Sales at Cube Renewables. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks to everybody at AF for the opportunity to speak a little bit about our technology and lagoon covering and biogas capture. As John said, so we are basically Cube is a small scale anaerobic digestion technology provider. So we don't just look at agri-waste, we effectively look at any organic waste stream and we look at how we can make renewable energy from those organic wastes. We do a lot of work with agriculture. We also do a lot of work with other organic waste streams and other sectors like food and drink industries. Just to give you a little bit of an idea on the sort of the scope of our technologies. So as John said, we were born out of an MOD contract in 2011. So we were an environmental consultancy and the MOD wanted a solution for sanitation waste and food waste and really high power cost or fuel cost in forward operating bases for the British Army. So we were actually looking at Basra in Afghanistan. So the fuel cost at the time was something like $200 a litre, and in the forward operating basis, you had a load of soldiers creating human sanitation waste and food waste. So we needed to sort of combine a solution to that. I don't know if you know, but in forward operating basis, generally sanitation waste is burned in diesel, so it's an incredibly expensive and also has a huge carbon footprint. So we developed a solution which was our first containerized modular system. All our kit is born around being the ability to sort of survive off grid, to be robust, simple, and modular. So this is a key part of the Cube ethos, if you like. So top left there is our BioCube. So the original unit that was designed by Cube is still working on the farm of our founders in West Somerset at the moment. And that's working on a basis of horse manure and food waste. So it's still generating power through that. The next technology we developed out of that was a much more deployable system. So I'm sort of giving you a background in terms of what we do, because it should help explain the ethos behind what we're trying to do with lagoon and slurry store biogas capture. So the Quick Cube was developed as a sort of much more deployable system, so we can put that into a 55-meter cubed digester can fit into about a third of an Arctic. and they can be transported by helicopter. So that's really where we're looking. But in terms of biogas and biogas production efficiency, we're still really, really efficient in terms of that. So we try not to compromise too much. We have the next product would be our Power Cube. So we have a system of our own adapted biogas generators, so CHP systems. We've found that efficiency at low level of biogas production in electricity generation can be really poor, and reliability is really poor as well. So we actually adapt our own engines and sell those as part of our kit if electricity is what the customer requires. Lagoon Cube on the top right, I'm going to talk to you about much more about that in a sec. The bottom left would be an interesting to you to sort of farmers generally. So unfortunately, this technology is not really relevant in our ambient temperatures, but we're putting in a unit at the moment in India which deals with rice straw. So in the paddy straw industry in northern India, they're burning about 35 million tons of straw a year. So the crop cycle means that the paddy is grown, it's harvested, and they need to get the rice and the straw out of the ground, so they burn it. And then they drill wheat probably about 10 days after that. So instead of burning it, we now have innovated a dry digestion technique specifically around that. So units now can encompass up to about 750 tons of paddy straw or biomass in one unit, and we're looking at significant biogas production, which is incentivized by the Indian government. So it's using that power for vehicle fuel in the transport network. We do a much smaller scale mini cube, which doesn't really have an application to you guys. And we also do some BATS cube. We do some really innovative approaches. So the unit you can see on the bottom right there is on an enormous horticultural flower farm in Kenya. So that would have about 7 or 8 tons of waste from rose production per day. So we're looking at different ways of creating, effectively using your organic waste stream, but being very specific about individual opportunities. We don't generally like putting in large concrete embedded wet digestion systems. We see them as very high cost, and they are also the sort of carbon footprint of them is really significant. And this is more and more of a driver about sort of slurry stored biogas capture going forward. So I've already told you about the history. So just to look at what we can do with the biogas, essentially. So we are there are several applications on it, and you as farmers would have very different requirements. So, for example, a pig farmer who's got 6,500 pigs kept inside, the electricity is their sort of prime driver. So we would run that biogas through a generator and create electricity. What we would say is that that's not possibly the most efficient system. But if electricity is that key driver, and we all know about fuel costs at the moment and electricity costs. So if that's the key driver, that's what we'll do. And it'll be a specific solution that fits in with the farm and sort of interfaces with the current farm system. And that's pretty key to what we do. It's all very well being very good at creating biogas and producing it, but if we can't use it effectively, it really has little application. On the dairy side, we'd use it a lot more for hot water through a biogas boiler. Again, that's a really efficient use of biogas. I'll go through a little bit more about what the production sort of levels are later on in the presentation, so you get an idea of the comparative or equivalent powers generated from slurry or whatever the feedstock is. So we can use that for clean cooking. I mean, essentially, we're looking at a couple of opportunities at the moment where farms might have a farm shop and do an awful lot of either food production or cooking for the farm shop restaurant. And that's a really, I mean, in terms of CSR and the sort of the carbon journey of that, that's a really good story. and using it as a clean cooking source is the most effective way of doing it. But you know, it's horses for courses. Some clients don't have that requirement. So we also can clean and compress it, and there's quite a lot of talk at the moment about biomethane tractors. What we would say is about, you know, we would just draw your attention to scale. So biogas is it's a very effective renewable energy, but it's not the silver bullet to everything. So you would need quite a lot of slurry to create enough fuel for the biogas tractor there. I mean, there's other technologies out there that look specifically at that and package it up. So we look much more at using the fuel it's actually on farm, but it's an application. I think the other thing that's really key in this is the digestate. Clearly, you guys are all, you know, if you've got livestock and you're spreading, this is a key part of getting organic matter back on the soil. So there's increasing amounts of data now in terms of post-AD digestate. So what comes out of the digester, the bioavailability of nutrients on those are really significant. And as the fertilizer costs have gone through the roof, you know, in the last month, I don't know what the percentage of growth is, but you know, it's really affecting people. We've had 3 calls from farms this week saying, you know, if we can't find some sort of renewable energy source, they're thinking of packing up because of fertilizer and energy costs. So I can share a bit more detail with you if you connect after this about that specific use and about the value and the NPK values. Again, you know, we can dry this. You know, you can dry it to reduce transportation and storage costs. But essentially, if you're spreading already, you know, we can use it and we can help integrate with your systems and give you a bit of idea about sort of offset fertilizer costs. And it can also be used it can be dried and used as an animal bedding as well. So it has sort of added value. I'm just going to skip through these. I've sort of gone through those technologies previously. So just to look at Lagoon Cube, so effectively, so what it actually is a flexible, removable cover, and it operates on an anaerobic digestion on your existing slurry store or tank. So effectively, I should have mentioned at the beginning, actually, we partner with an agricultural covers company called Linton and Robinson, and their logo was on my front slide. So effectively, we're really good at biogas, but they're really good at covering and lining lagoons, ponds. They can put tanks in. So we work with them very closely. So they will engineer a floating cover that's removable, but that cover then acts as an anaerobic digester. So it floats on the top of any open, it can be an open top tank, a settling pond. We're looking at lots of opportunities outside of the livestock industry. So palm oil is a really interesting opportunity for us, huge amounts of effluent water. We're looking at cassava, lots of different sort of areas, but obviously animal, so slurry at the moment in the UK is the biggest opportunity. Particularly as they've just brought a grant in for helping put covers over slurry stores. Not a huge grant, but it all sort of helps really. So this floats on the top, and we capture the biogas from that system. What we've incorporated into that is either a gas mixing or a propeller style agitation system. So that prevents crusting on the top. But it agitates, it keeps the slurry moving, and it ensures biogas efficiency. So that, which is kind of key to what we're doing. So it's ideal for slurry stores, water tanks, etc. So the key being, we try and work with existing units. We don't, you know, if you've got a lagoon, generally speaking, an inquiry would start with getting the what 3 words reference on your farm, so we can have a look at it from the top. We can have a look at the existing system, whether we can adapt to that. So again, the technology is all about it floats with the changing level of slurry. So obviously, livestock farmers, you're emptying at certain times of the year. Those are being reduced pretty much by regulations. So our cover floats with that, and we've got a lot of technology to avoid hippoing, and we then harvest from that. We pump off the excess rainwater. So any rainwater that falls means that you're not putting that into the slurry store. There are two sort of ways of doing it. We used to use tessellating pods, so the pods sort of in the middle on the left there. We've found that those are less effective in terms of gas seal. So those are really good as trial units. We can float one of those on a pond and work out what biogas per area you're getting, and then we can accurately model what you would get and the sort of payback in terms of the technology of biogas capture. What we're looking at much more, and that's with Linton and Robinson, is the full covers. So in terms of the kind of the development of the technology, up until the government announced grants on the covers, people were quite reticent to actually to commit to it. So I think a lot of people were waiting for that. So we're probably, in TRL terms, we're probably sort of TRL 8 on it. So we've got existing units, and we need to roll that out now. So you can see at the bottom there, that was our biggest existing unit. So that was installed in Norfolk, and again using animal waste in a lagoon, floating cover. And so the key, I suppose, to this would be we're taking the biogas off, but this is all about ammonia mitigation essentially. So the government regulations is about covering manure stores for capturing that ammonia. So we do that, and then the biogas capture is essentially a bonus. If you cover your lagoons or your tanks with to capture the ammonia, I mean, essentially what you're doing is creating an anaerobic digester, or you're improving efficiency of that anaerobic digestion. So you're increasing methane emission, and at the moment there is no regulation to say that that's not vented. So that's what's going to happen effectively. So what we're doing is just capturing that and taking it off and using it on farm. But the ammonia, the ammonia sort of capture of that and mitigation is included in the technology. So it's encompassed in the government regulations. So just to give you an idea how it would look, so you can see you've obviously got your lagoon, you've got a floating cover on there, you've got a few pockets of rainwater on the top. We would supply all the sort of ancillaries around that. So we would do the cover. Linton and Robinson would obviously do that for us. All the gas offtake controls, gas mixing systems. We would give you a sort of all-in solution to your specific lagoon. We put generally we'll put in a 20-foot container biogas store. That can depend on how you want to use it. So if you're going to empty a lot and you're going to want to store more biogas, then we would look at a slightly different solution to that. So it's really a question of how you would use it on the ground. And we put full control systems. We have a processing office as part of it. And the key to this is that the data coming off these units is coming back to us real time. So we have an HQ. We're based in West Somerset. We make a lot of our kit in Devon, but essentially our office is there, and the technical team are looking at data from all of our units, sort of about twice a day. So not only can that look at the sort of efficiency of it, but it also flags up if there are any issues, if there's any problems. So it's a really useful part of our efficiency. So again, we would then look at on this version, we would look at a CHP system up to 30 kilowatt, and we would supply that and install that. So things that we wouldn't include, there's a really large boat, so we don't actually include shipping in our quotes, but I'm sure we could come to some arrangement on that. So groundwork, civils, all of those kind of things, we would work with you in terms of, we would tell you exactly what we need. So water, power, shipping, we would look at, so with each farm, we'd look at digestate storage. So you know, if we need to take some off, and then before you actually spread it, but in terms of lagoon technology, that's generally taken care of. So it's a much easier prospect, and we would help you with the digestate in terms of what the NPK nutrient availabilities would be of that. And if there's any modification to the boilers, we wouldn't, you know, we don't include that in the price, but we're very happy to advise on how biogas kind of interfaces with your current boilers, and then we'd talk to your contractors if necessary. But that's not, you know, we don't supply that. We're not experts on that bit.
We've got some good questions coming in now, James. Sorry to pick.
Yeah, go for it.
We've got a couple of questions. One of them, I think, is relating more to the area that we're in, and the question is, how easy is it going to be to obtain planning permission for these types of product in protected sites across Norfolk?
So again, I mean, in terms of planning, if there's a lagoon there already, all we're doing is covering it. And we have, as part, going back to the beginning of Q, we have an environmental consultancy that does planning for all of these applications. So if you want a bit of advice on that, just connect with me and we could I can give you some advice. But essentially, we're using, you know, we're working with this kit that exists already.
James, can you check your connection, please? We seem to have lost you here in the AF office.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little bit better.
John, hello. Okay. How's that?
That's a little bit better. We can hear you. It's not great.
I'll shout if you want. Okay, did you have another question?
Yeah. Question is about, the second question is about whether the existing slurry bags can be used for gas collection.
So when you say slurry bags, so slurry bags are designed.
I'm guessing slurry covers. It's not my specialist area of expertise, but yeah, existing slurry covers that lots of our members will already have invested in. Can they be used for collecting gas?
Yeah, so we can re-engineer those slightly depending on what their system is. So our first port of call with that would be if they got in touch with us, we would then talk to our covers company and just make sure that we can sort of re-engineer it. So it is very specific around what they've got in place at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. And is there a minimum amount of slurry that you can actually use to generate gas from?
So, I mean, it affects the payback rate essentially. So you know, we're a business. We're trying to create biogas as a service. If you so it's a really interesting question. So dairy farms where the cows are in all year will be much better because there'll be more slurry and it's spread twice a year. There's a lot more biogas coming off that. If cows are out 7-8 months of the year, that then means you have less slurry, which means you have less biogas. So there's a sort of economic, you know, there's a cut-off point, depending really on what the drivers are. You know, if it's all financial, then you know that there will be a cut-off, depending on what payback time you want. If it's a CSR issue, if it's a dairy farm, buyers are insisting on sort of on an improved kind of green carbon journey, then that's another factor in it, and that helps. So slightly depends on individuals.
I think we've had several questions coming about economics of installing a plant. So I think that's something that we'll leave until after the event and try and pick those ones up individually if we have members that are specifically interested in commissioning and installation. So thank you very much for that, James. That's a fascinating insight.
We can just have a quick chat on that. I mean, essentially, a tank is much easier to give a sort of standardised quote. A lagoon is a specific, it's absolutely individual to your plant. So, yeah, John, we can catch up about that later on.
And just a last quick question. We've had one about poultry manure. Can poultry manure be used for this process?
So, actually, really high nitrogen levels make it very difficult, and we would. There's a sort of rule of thumb that is 1 to 10, so 1 part.
Okay, so I think we've kind of you're breaking up now again.
Okay, sorry. Yeah,
I appreciate that. Perhaps that's one that I can send to you afterwards. But
yeah, I'll bring it on the chat.
So I think. Thank you very much. I think we've had a slight change to the schedule now. In that we're going to swap around and try and get the presentation from Emily Stevenson and Sophie Barker at F&S on first. F&S are a company that specialises in facilitating the sale of surplus energy that is generated by our members back to the grid through power purchase agreements. This is at a time when everyone is looking to maximise the benefits and returns from any generation on site, whether it be by offsetting their own power demands or actually exporting it to the grid. Whilst the generators in the audience may be familiar with F&S Energy, as they've been a long-standing helper of AF and AF members, one of the things that I'll also mention, and I'm not sure how much they're going to go into this, Emily also specialises in peer-to-peer products, which I think are going to gain much more popularity over the next few years.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, John. So good afternoon, everybody. As John said, I think we recognise some of the people in the chat today. But for those of you that don't know, we're a renewable electricity supplier. So we've been in the market since 2011, and we specialise in export agreements and non-domestic supplies from imports. So I'm personally Emily Stevenson. As John said, I'm a renewable energy manager. So I do all the renewable obligation schemes and developing new schemes such as our peer-to-peer scheme, which is obviously quite a big and upcoming thing that we're focusing on at the moment.
And I'm Sophie, and I'm the account manager. I manage customer relations and I manage the team on a day-to-day basis. I also deal with quite a lot of the quotes as well.
Thank you. So we're kind of coming at this from a basis of there's a mixture of people in this group, obviously, at the moment. There's ones that already have exports set up, and you'll be looking at how can I get more for my exported power, but there's also sites where they have generation, and you're kind of thinking about, specifically with the market conditions at the moment, is this now the time to start looking at exporting my power? So it's not always possible to use all your generated power on your site. And we know that if you've got a smaller usage, but you've got a lot of capacity to add generation on site, you're going to be looking at exporting that to the grid. So this is where we recommend kind of looking into power purchase agreements.
So to get the full benefits really from a PPA agreement, you need to really speak to your distributor about having an export connection added to your generation. Something that you do really need to think about before getting that set up is the size of your generator. We do have a lot of people that come to us with sites that are under 30 kilowatts. But because you need to have metering and all data collection appointed, some of the charges can outweigh the income that's from your exported power if your site is smaller than 30 kilowatts. So once you've got your export connection to the grid, there are a few things that you need to think about to get the best deal for this power. So managing agents like Anglia Farmers, they can look into the best options and make sure also that you're using a reliable supplier. So the most common type of PPA that we do is a fixed rate, and it's usually fixed for a year, which allows generators to benefit from market competitive prices, but also offers some stability. There are other options such as fixing for a slightly longer period of 2 years, or you can get a flexible rate known as a pass-through. That's really...
Yeah, so kind of just to build a little bit on what Sophie's saying there, obviously at the moment, we've got the prices in the market are really high at the moment. So you can kind of see from this graph, just to kind of explain what we're looking at. This is start of May last year. The prices were right the way down the bottom. So it's kind of, we were getting to a point in the industry where people were saying, with the end of the FIT scheme.
Emily?
Yes.
Sorry, you're, we can't see your graph at the moment. Your screen doesn't seem to be changing the PowerPoint.
Oh, that's strange. Let me stop and share again and see if it comes back to the screen that we're on. Share screen.
Can you see it now?
That's great. I can see it now. Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Brilliant. Just wasn't updating the slides that we were on then. So basically, this is just an overview of what the market's doing at the moment. So this is a very basic graph. It's just the summer base load for the past year, really. So you can look at where we were May last year, right the way down below. It's about 5 pence around May last year. And this shows kind of a general increase in the market rates. So this is a general increase in what you can get for your PPAs. So it's a really good time to be kind of looking at exporting your power and seeing how you can benefit most from these powers. So obviously there's specific spikes in the market. We had a spike in September time. There was a fire on one of the interconnectors connected to gas. And then there was a spike here. It's obviously war in Ukraine, but it, even ignoring those spikes, there is a general upward trend, and this kind of reflects the need for the UK to kind of move to renewable power. So there's real push at the moment to get more renewables in and more renewables on competitive export agreements to kind of make it so that we're not reliant on gas and things like that. So now is definitely, even though it has obviously dropped off, a really good time to be looking at your exported power and how to get the most from it. Yeah, I'm not sure if our slide's working, but I'll leave the prices up there for everybody to look at. But we can kind of cover basically, this is the basis of what you can get on this, for your exported power. And there really is kind of a push towards looking further into the markets and how we can get more for what people are exporting. So from FNS's perspective, we've been working with Ofgem to develop a peer-to-peer scheme, which is what John kind of mentioned briefly at the start of the chat. So our peer-to-peer scheme means that where you have an export agreement through us, you can now directly connect with a consumer and trade your power to them directly. So that means that from their point of view, they're getting power from a renewable generator. It's UK based, it's 100% green, it's renewable, they know where it's coming from. And from the generator's perspective, there's an agreement in place that says, I'm providing this consumer with my power, and there's financial benefit for all parties involved. So it's a way to get a little bit extra from what you're getting for your power, as well as kind of knowing exactly where that power is coming from. And it's really what people are moving towards, being 100% green, 100% renewable, and supporting local farms or just farms across the country and things like that. So it's a scheme kind of at the moment that we're really pushing, and we've had quite good feedback on it, and people are really benefiting from getting onto this scheme, getting matched. There's two ways that you can kind of go about it. You can either go about it from I've got a consumer nearby me that wants to benefit from the scheme, can I match to them? You can go about it in I've got a farm site in one area and I've got renewable generation in the other area, can I connect these two sites? Or you can come to us and you can say, we've got this generation, we're exporting most of it to the grid, we want to benefit from selling directly to a consumer, can you find me a consumer? And our systems are set up that we can find you the best match possible. So that's kind of the basis of what we were going to cover today. I don't know if we've got any questions at all or anything like that.
Yeah, we have quite a few questions, to be fair. A lot of them relate to pricing and yeah, what the market is going to do. But I think yeah, so some initial questions, probably rather than asking you and putting you on the spot with regard to pricing is today. If you can give us just a quick overview of yeah, whether it's beneficial for people to place their PPAs in advance, or whether it's worth waiting to the last minute of your existing PPA agreement expiring. Just a quick overview of what's the best process for pricing and getting the best deal to lock in for the next 12 months.
Yes, definitely. So the way that prices work really is they're done on the market at the time. So if you come to us on the morning of the day, it'll be based on the market prices of that day. They are very volatile at the moment, so they're all over the place. So it's a bit of a different market now than it was, say, a year ago, but you can get far better deals from it. So you want to avoid any, with obviously, say, for example, if you're using the war in Ukraine, we had a lot of people come to us the next day asking for prices the next day. That's kind of the wrong time to be looking at it, because you need to wait for it kind of to settle down a little bit, because at that time, market's very volatile and suppliers are going to be looking at putting kind of a margin on there because it's going to either shoot up or drop down again. So the best thing to do is we wouldn't recommend people looking more than 6 months in advance to renew their contract, because there's going to be more uncertainty on the market. So you kind of want to stay within 6 months of your renewal date and then start looking at a price. It doesn't really make any difference whether that's 6 months in advance or you ask a week before you're due to renew. The 6 months obviously is going to be easier because you've given yourself a bit of time to kind of decide whether you want to lock in straight away or whether you want to wait and see what the market does. There are flexible agreements kind of on offer where you just say lock in for a year, but it's on a flexible market-based rate. That's obviously less stability for the generator, and we don't see many people going for that option, but it is there if you want to kind of play the markets and see where they're going to go. But yeah, really to answer the question on the basis, any time between 6 months and a week before your renewal is the best time to be looking at it.
Okay, thank you. Now we've got a few other questions which relate to peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
And some of the questions, I think two of the questions actually relate to whether it can get around issues with grid capacity on particular connections.
So this particular scheme can't, because the way that our scheme's set up is it's set up for our existing export agreements, because it's all through the grid. So from the generator's point of view, they're not going to be doing any extra work. So it's all facilitated by FNF, goes through the grid as normal. So it still needs to have that grid capacity there. We still pay in the grid charges. It's renewable obligations that we get a bit of a discount on. So that's where the financial benefit comes from for the generator. There is a movement towards these direct supply agreements in general. So we do see it going in a way that if you're looking to get around the grid capacity, it's more private wires. That's more technical and complicated and more work for the generator, but there is options there to kind of get around it that way. But in this sake, it goes through the grid.
We've got a few questions as well about grid transmission costs for peer-to-peer networks. Now, I'm assuming that is probably going to be site-specific, depending upon what their pass-throughs are going to be. But can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, definitely. So whatever you are currently paying, if you know your grid charges, they are not going to change on the peer-to-peer scheme. So that's all the same. So you're still paying for the grid. Like I say, it's renewable obligations that you're getting a discount on. So there is the financial benefit there. It's very different from like a sleeved agreement or a private wire where you can kind of get around a lot of those grid charges. So you're still paying the grid charges. Obviously, if you get a quote from ourselves, all those are included in the price that we offer you, rather than adding them on extras afterwards. And
the effect is the same in the triad periods as well, between 4 and 7 p.m.
Yes, yeah, everything else works as normal.
It's the same standing charges and grid charges.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. No, I think that's great. That's yeah. We've got a few other questions and probably a few things that we're going to need to pick up with you going forward. But thank you very much for that, ladies. Hopefully we can catch up with you again soon and get some additional answers to these questions.
Definitely. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Again, moving on. The next speaker is going to give us a presentation on a topic that many of our members are familiar with. I'd like to introduce Alistair Monroe. He's the Managing Director of Rise Energy. And I think also his colleague Lucy Bolton, who's the Client Development Manager at Rise Energy. Rise are a specialist in on and off-grid solutions using wind and solar, or a combination of both, together with battery storage. Now, I saw a few questions popping up in the previous discussion about battery storage, so hopefully this will come on and answer a few of those as well. Alistair and Lucy will be discussing whether wind and solar compete with each other or whether they're complementary. A key topic they'll be focusing on will also be reliability and performance monitoring of generation equipment. RISE are a long-standing supplier of AF, and they're one of the few suppliers that consistently are able to provide hybrid wind and solar approaches. And they do this with nationwide backup. So I'll hand over to Alistair. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the introduction, and my apologies for being slightly late today. I'm actually traveling at the moment, and my calendar seems to have got 1 hour out in schedule. So again, my apologies, and thanks for the flexibility of fitting us in after the ladies. Yeah, Rise Energy has been around for a while. We have merged a number of companies that are specialists in this sector together, and as you said, we have a long-standing relationship, especially in the UK market, where we're one of the few remaining manufacturers, domestic manufacturers of small wind turbines, and we are also the only manufacturer that services our own fleet and other companies that have supplied wind turbines into the marketplace. We have around 1,000 of our own units installed in the UK, and we service probably the same again of other companies that are either still in business but don't service, or unfortunately many of them have gone into liquidation post the removal of the feed-in tariff program. So Rise Energy is our core technology is obviously wind. As the market has developed, we've also become a specialist in decentralized power. So therefore our area of expertise is the wind, the solar, and the energy storage, and clearly the balance of plant that goes with that. In other markets, we also provide mobile sustainability, which is going to be quite interesting also in the UK market with the removal of the availability of red diesel for construction power. So we're seeing a lot of companies in the construction industry now with a massive uplift in the cost of their diesel for temporary power. So they're also looking at mobile sustainability and the deployment of renewables in a way that can reduce diesel, if not displace diesel. We've also expanded our operations internationally. So we have now manufacturing in Spain. We have a joint venture for manufacturing in India, and offices in the Middle East and in the United States. So really the core of our business is in developing countries, and developed countries very different. In developing countries, we're looking at displacing energy poverty through providing power from sustainable sources. In accommodation, we're looking at displacing diesel, which is a very high cost and very dirty way of generating electrical power. But the one that's probably of most interest to the people on this call today is providing clean energy for commercially driven markets. And that's something that's really important. So we all believe in sustainability, especially in the agricultural sector. It's a big issue. But also we need to be able to do this in a way that doesn't add cost. It actually makes us more competitive and it's commercially viable. So it's not just about sustainability. As a company, we're very accredited. We do a lot in terms of the industry. So internationally, we're members of ARENA. In the UK, obviously, we're MCS approved for both installation and manufacturing of our equipment. So it's very important in terms of quality that we're looking at these accreditations. Our product range is very wide. We all know that wind is an interesting resource, varies from region to region. So you've got different wind classifications from class 3, which is our traditional Gaia machine, Heritage G machine that you see in the background. We've got more than 1,000 of those operating in the UK, very efficient, but designed for medium speed winds. As you move north, obviously in Scotland, where I obviously come from, the wind speeds tend to get a bit higher. So we're looking at the much higher classification machines designed in a different way, a lower swept area, still very efficient, but a smaller swept area for the same output. So when you're looking at the west of Scotland, the north of Scotland, the Outer Hebrides, Ireland, very high wind speed markets, and therefore the machine has to be robust and designed for those conditions. So with over 4,000 installations, this is really the basis of our company. It's all about proven technology and reliability and efficiency. When we're talking about how do the two technologies work together, or do they compete? That's a very interesting question. Everybody thinks solar is very cheap. Well, it is low in capital cost, but the productivity is relatively low because you're only generating through the hours that the sun's in the sky. And of course, in the UK, we have seasonal differences between summer and winter, much shorter days, obviously, in the winter. And if you are Scottish, no days during the winter. So solar itself is a very variable generator of power. And as we heard earlier on, you've got all these variances in terms of what's the cost of power during the day, what's the cost of power at night. And it's quite a complex structure when you're looking at doing the economic assessment. When you add wind and solar together, it's very much a synergistic hybrid system whereby wind is both seasonally and daily varying. You've got better wind typically in night conditions, you've got better wind in winter conditions. Solar, of course, is only through the hours of daylight. And of course, in the winter time, you're getting less productivity. So what you see is a balancing out. So especially when we're looking at consumers who are fully self-consuming of power, this balance of wind and solar actually gives you the maximum capacity from the land space you have or the roof space you have. And that's giving you the ability to minimize your purchase from the grid. So we are really looking at customers who are consuming their power, because as you're exporting power into the grid, as we heard from the previous presentation, you're not getting a lot for it sometimes of the day. Weekend generation, if you're only working a 5-day week, you're not getting a lot of the weekend. And all of this is the balancing act that you have to do with self-generation versus purchase of power from the grid. But what we all do know is that the cost of purchasing power from the grid is going up, and it's not going to come back down. And so I would say probably about 18 months ago, we got to the situation where we got to that threshold point where it's absolutely clear now that self-generation of power is more cost effective in most cases than purchasing power from the grid. And that's really a commercial decision that we have to take. And by fixing your costs, by installing your own power generation, you know what your cost structure is going to be because you've paid for your capital expenditure. It's a fixed cost. You're depreciating it over the life of a proven technology, and therefore you're in control of your own destiny in terms of your electricity power costs. So when we're looking at our type of technology, I just want to show you some examples here, which are obviously agricultural examples. We've just got some emails from our customers in Scotland who were one of the first installers of the G11 machine. They've now generated over the past 15 years, more than 500 megawatt hours of power reliably. And you can just do your own economics. Look at what you're paying today per kilowatt hour, multiply that by 500,000. That gives you your return on investment. So you can see that those customers are very pleased to have contacted us recently and told us that they've crossed this threshold. Part of that is all about how do we monitor those systems? Do we make sure that those systems have the maximum amount of uptime? And we've also got our own service teams around the country, and we're expanding that service coverage in the near future to make sure that our customers get the maximum uptime and the maximum return on investment. It's a UK manufactured product, UK manufactured service team. The units are in Blackpool. Lucy's there as our client relationship manager in the UK, and I'm the CEO, and we're very pleased to be associated with Anglian farmers. When we're also talking about solar, there is always a case for solar, especially the further south in the United Kingdom you go. The solar resource in the UK is good. It does take a lot of land space, but there's still an economic return for solar. Rooftop combination with wind is an ideal combination where you're utilizing space that isn't normally used. So that's how we are seeing the marketplace. And as we look forward, we see a big future for renewables, especially in the agriculture sector, as we're looking to displace both hydrocarbons and also reduce our carbon footprint as an industry sector. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present our company to you today, and we're very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Alistair, and yeah, absolutely no problem about yeah, rescheduling you. That's absolutely fine. It was well worth doing to hear you talk. We do have a few questions. The first question is, yeah, can you suggest a size of wind turbine to complement a 30 or 50 kilowatt solar installation?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It depends on where you are, of course, but what we would say is that typically you're getting in the UK, you will get probably twice or 3 times as much annual electricity output from a wind turbine of the same capacity. So if you would say your AEP of a 10 kilowatt or 11 kilowatt, like the G11 there, will be 25 to 30,000 kilowatt hours, even up to 40,000 in the north of Scotland, that's probably the same as you're going to get from the solar capacity that you've just explained, so, or you've just described. So you're getting in that order, depending on wind resource, of 2 to 4 times as much. So if you're looking to balance things out, you're probably looking at a turbine that is around the size of the G11, maybe around 10 to 20 maximum kilowatts compared to a 30 to 40 kilowatt solar balance.
Okay, and just, I know again, this is a difficult question, depends on size of tower and things, but do you have a ballpark figure for the price of a G11 turbine?
Yeah, typically installed for a 3-phase system, we'd be looking at somewhere around £60,000 installed. But it is very much dependent on site conditions, planning aspects. You know, there's a number of variables. Then you've got single phase, 3-phase. So I'll give you a number because I know people like to put a peg in the ground, but it could be plus or minus 15% on that, depending on local conditions and the full scope of supply.
Yeah, no, I understand that. It is very site specific, but
yeah.
In terms of planning, do you find any resistance with planning authorities to get wind turbines in these days?
Less than probably there used to be. Obviously, you've got areas of natural beauty, you've got particular restrictions, but I think you've got, and there is often a misunderstanding when people see the word turbine, they think of something that's 100+ meters tall and they think of big grid connected wind power, whereas we're in the other end of the scale. So Lucy's much more expert in this, but we don't have as many problems in terms of planning that we used to have. Again, you've got to think about flight paths. Again, some airports are more flexible than others. They've got upgraded radar systems. It's very easy to block out. I'm sorry, but again, I'm Scottish. Edinburgh Airport wouldn't charge you anything to block something out. Glasgow Airport will charge you a fortune to block something out on their radar. So it does tend to come down to local relationships, but we do see a more positive approach to planning in the marketplace nowadays.
Okay. I have another question which, sorry, were you going to say something, Lucy? Can you unmute, please? I still can't hear you, sorry. I think it may be in your settings, but I'll go ahead and ask this question first while you're dealing with that. We've had a question from a member who is asking about what the economies are of storing energy in batteries from your wind and solar approaches. I think you'll have to.
Really,
Alistair.
That is a really good question. Again, batteries is still an evolving technology, and at the moment, if you can avoid putting batteries into your energy mix, you're better doing so. So, as I said earlier on, the most cost-effective way of dealing with renewable energy you're generating on site is to be consuming it yourself. There's not a lot of, there's an emotional and philosophical justification for storage But at the moment, we're still seeing the economics dropping quite significantly in energy storage areas. It's a technology that will drop in price, I'm sure, over the next few years, and also change in technology. I mean, we're seeing flow batteries become more competitive now as opposed to lithium. We're seeing different profiles in the way they perform. Domestically, we're seeing a lot of uptake in people being able to buy power off peak and then use it on peak. But in terms of industrial cost, it's still a very expensive investment for not a lot of economic return. So there's got to be special cases where there is a business case for investment into significant capacity batteries.
Yeah, I think the discussions I've had with Lucy previously on battery system kind of echoes that at the moment that
I would hope so.
is quite high, and with the PPA price being high, the economics of batteries don't make that much sense. But I've always installing more generation is never going to be a bad thing.
Yeah, and batteries don't really add value. They just allow you to maximize the harvesting value you're creating through another process you've already paid for. So it's not really additive. It's just flattening out when you can use the energy, because energy is not easy to store. But if you have the demand all the time, that's the most economic way. And a lot of agricultural applications have that demand on a base load basis.
I'm not sure whether we managed to get Lucy back.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hey, it was just a really quick point on the planning question that came up. It's just to say, when we sort of start to look at a site, and I've just had a look down the attendees list, and there's a few people on there who are existing service customers and also people that we've been talking with, and we would look at doing a brief planning assessment to start with right at the very beginning, just having a look using government resources, having a look at the site. We've got in-house knowledge and experience of renewables planning, so it's just at that very early stage we will have a look, and if there's anything glaringly obvious that needs to be tackled sort of at an early stage, we can address it right from the word go, really, and see what might crop up down the line.
Yeah, that's great. No, thanks for that. I know you've done that for a few of our members already. So yeah, no, I can appreciate that, and thanks to both of you for a great presentation, and I think that's it for the questions for now. So I think what I'm going to do is try and wrap up the session here. Thanks to everyone who has attended. We've still got 60 participants logged in. Sophie is going to share some of the contact information and ways in which you can contact us to get the information or ask any questions which are outstanding. The next AF webinar will be on the 20th of April, where AF members will get an exclusive first look at the updated ag inflation figures through AF. So please look out for the invite to that one. In the meantime, if you'd like to discuss anything regarding on-farm renewables, you know where I am, and please get in touch. Thank you very much.